Can you talk about how that type of imaginative play is significant, actually, when we're working with children? And we're talking in this project about taking that role play right through. So we're not just talking about early years here. In fact, we're actually specifically talking about beyond early years. But if we're thinking about anti-racist practice, is there a way practically that we can be thinking about something like role play, both in the provision and the experiences that happen there?
Role play is such an interesting area for me, and I love it because I'm really big on obviously drama, as I talked about, but also the prospect of reimagining. As adults, we live in hope, don't we? If we're thinking about social justice and we're thinking about equity. And we can only live in hope if we can reimagine a future that doesn't look like our present. That's role play, isn't it? We're playing into this reimagining of a utopia where we're not governed by these systems which seek to categorize us and put us in boxes and places and blocks our access to things. Role play is essential. And as you said, Kim, not just for the early years, but all the way through. When we are thinking about the ways in which role play can be reductive, this is where we have to start actively challenging and thinking about drawing in this anti-racist thread. And I think we have been trained to think that role play is about not just reimagining in that expansive sense that I've talked about, but that it's being very closed in this reductive, flat pack kind of way where we have been adopting role play as a mechanism to dress up, for children to dress up, and then that's it. And to dress up as other people from different cultural backgrounds, different ethnicities. And then we start finding ourselves moving into this very dangerous territory of forms of blackface, forms of yellowface. And this is problematic. So the history associated with blackface and yellowface is something we need to be really conscious of. And also the evolution of it, because it doesn't look the same in 2022. Of course it doesn't. But we know up until the late 1970s, particularly in a UK context on the television, the black and white minstrel show was something that was shown as general entertainment for everybody, where people who were white would black their faces and draw on big red lips and reenact what they perceived to be black people. And this mockery of what people lent into stereotypes around who they perceived black people to be. Similarly, if we think about the notion of yellowface, rooted in this mockery of people whose heritage is East or Southeast Asian, and these notions of being villainous or being a geek. So if we think about actors like Mickey Rooney, we think about, most presently actually, David Walliams, this notion of deep mockery and stereotypes, which influence actually how people see the world and citizens of the globe. Dangerous. Let's bring this back now into role play. We know there are a great deal of stockists of role play costumes, and I'm going to use that with, inverted commas, which seek to say, if children dress up as somebody else from another culture, another ethnicity, another racialized identity, where is the line? Where and how are we thinking about one's whole experience being reduced to cultural dress? Where is the line that we say, okay, well, we can do that, but don't paint your child's face brown. We can do this, but don't put on an Afro wig. Where is the line? And I'm really interested in this notion of reimagining without the props. You don't need to dress a child up. You don't need, as another person from another culture, another ethnicity, in order for them to appreciate, enjoy, and learn. And also, it isn't child-led. No child is coming into a setting, into a space, to ask if they could dress up as a black person today. That's adult-led. And if it's adult-led, we need to investigate and interrogate where that's come from. Because I would argue there's a history associated to that people cannot be ignorant to, not in the technological age, not in this current climate. and it's an excuse to be ignorant. We can't afford to be. There is too much information. This is the age of information. And there are too many people with lived experiences of the global majority who can tell you about that history, and they should be listened to, much in the same way as you'd said, Kim. If you're working with children in a different setting, if you're thinking about SEND, if you're thinking about homophobia, if you're thinking about transphobia, it is the voices of those marginalised groups that you should be listening to. It's very important. And as I said earlier, this active listening process is integral. So when we're thinking about role play and my work in role play, it is to move away from this flat pack idea of, right, it's Eid or it's Lunar New Year, which is often referred to as Chinese New Year. But I also ask us to think about language within regards to that, because Lunar New Year is a much more inclusive term. And not just because I'm telling you, because that has been informed by work that I have done with an organisation called Be Seen, which, for anybody on the call who is watching this back, look Be Seen up, the British East and South East Asian Network, Be Seen, BSE, British East South S, British East South East Asian Network. Those first letters, see, my brain was working on overtime, but look at Be Seen. But Be Seen have produced a beautiful, amazing resource, actually, to inform how we must acknowledge Lunar New Year in our educational settings, particularly pertaining to role play. And Be Seen, which is it's a grassroots organisation of six women initially. It's evolved since then. But they talk about, perhaps, if we want children to understand about the beauty of cultural clothing, display it or put it on a mannequin. Show it respect, acknowledge it, have that so the children can observe and look and talk about the beautiful materials, how it looks, how it feels. This becomes a sensory experience. You don't have to put it on. You don't have to paint your face brown to experience what it might be to be a Black person. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I want us to think about role play as an immersive experience that encourages children to reimagine by having conversations, by experiencing things through media, through having people come into the setting, if you're in a setting where you have access to different communities, different, places where you'd experience food, tastes, smells, that it reimagines, it helps us to tap into different elements as opposed to just this, let's put these outfits on and now we are, insert whatever ethnicity here.
Thanks, Liz. I mean, I think along with reimagine, I'm thinking respect just coming through there. And yeah, it doesn't mean perhaps veer away from these ideas, but be thoughtful and seek information to make sure that you're not accidentally reinforcing stereotypes that I think can traditionally happen, especially through some of the more tokenistic stuff. It makes me think about, I know as we're working right the way through the school, not all of the role play can necessarily be completely child-led because there'll be objectives and so on, but it makes me think about when we do watch the children and what they're already exploring from their real lives. Like, when I worked in Lewisham, I'd often see children being in the barbers, doing cornrows on each other, and it would automatically lead into role play for others that was inclusive, but it actually came from the children and noticing and listening and recognizing their lived experiences. Again, not what we'd like their lived experiences to be, which previously would have been a travel agent's, because that helped us to explore certain areas of learning. And I guess a skill here is seeing what the children's lived experience is, recognizing that, and then our job as educators is to build the additional learning into that, isn't it? And to see how this is very powerful. It's something children know about. How can we build upon that, and how can we build more and more learning? And I mean, there's an amazing amount of maths and literacy, all aspects that can come out of a beauty salon, nail salon, barbers, marketing materials, all sorts, ordering stuff. So I've taken that actually at times all the way up to year 6 as a project